Hey guys, what's up? My name is Anthony, and welcome to another edition of BNA Sports Talk. So I've been talking about some couple teams. I've showed optimism about some teams like the Bills or the Jets or maybe the Patriots, the Bears, different things like that. And I've also had some negative videos that weren't too well received, like I did a video about the Texans and how they're going to be 5-11. So today I'm making another video where I'm not shitting on a team, but I'm going to tell you why they're going to pull back. And the reason why they're going to pull back is it's almost impossible for them to do as good as did last year. It's the Rams. So statistically, the teams that are picked over 10 wins, only 3 or 4 every single year actually make the playoffs. Not have 10 wins. Make the playoffs. So the Rams are projected at 10 wins this season. You also have the Saints, the Patriots, and a couple other teams that I'm forgetting off the top of my head right now. But you have a couple teams that are projected 10 or more wins. I think the Eagles are one, the Chiefs. I think the Chargers are 9.5. But you guys get the point. So one of these teams is going to be not going to make the playoffs. And I think it's the Rams. So I have a couple points that I want to make. First of all, let's just recap how they did last year. So last year they went 13-3. They started off, I think, 7-0. So let's work through their schedule. Their first couple weeks, they start off pretty strong against, fairly easy teams, you could say. But, I mean, you can only play who's on your schedule. So it was the Raiders, the Cardinals. Then they beat the Chargers. That was a big game. That was before the Chargers really got some momentum. That's a big game that they won. Then they also beat the Vikings in that one game and kind of crushed the Vikings' hopes and dreams last year. And then they also played the Seahawks, won by 2. Then they won by 3 against the Broncos. So they started having some tight games. Next, they started getting momentum. And they played the 49ers. They destroyed them. And then really should have lost against Green Bay if it wasn't for a mistake by Ty Montgomery. But yeah, there's that. Then they lost to the Saints away. That was the big game where they're both like 8-1 at this point, or 8-0 or something like that. I mean, I think the Saints were 8-1 and they were 9-0 or something. And they lost to the Saints. And yeah, a bunch of people were like, oh, that's a changing of the guard. The Saints are going to go to the Super Bowl. And then they had that rematch later in the year. Then they played obviously the Seahawks again because they're in division rivals. Beat them twice, which is a good sign. Then they had that big game against Kansas City that was probably the biggest statement when you had Jared Goff showing off his arm. And he has one of the most beautiful deep balls ever. Like, you saw some of those balls to Cooper Kupp. And then Cooper Kupp got injured. I think a couple weeks later. And this is where their season started to unravel just a little bit, I would say, just unobjectively. They lost 2 straight games against the Bears and the Eagles. Then they beat the Cardinals and 49ers to end the year, but a bunch of people were looking at them like, oh, this team is not the same. Are they going to be good going into the rest of the season? One of the things that last year was really overrated was their defense. You look at the Rams, and last year, you probably would have said, oh, their defense was top 10. No, it was actually in the bottom third of the league. But their cornerbacks did do an above average job, better than I thought they were. They were top 5 as far as pass defense. This year, I think they take a huge step back as far as that goes. Marcus Peters, Aqib Talib, you did get Eric Weddle, and you have some young pieces there. I'm not a Rams fan, so I'm not going to start rattling off names like the back of my hand. Like, I know them like the back of my hand, but I think your secondary is getting really young. You added Clay Matthews, which is, I think he's done. I really do think he's done. Their linebacking was probably their only weakness last year on that defense, and they lost. They definitely didn't win as far as that goes. I think they did pick up another linebacker in the draft, but I don't think that's good enough. Then you have Ndamukong Suh on that defensive line. That's pretty much the only name I know on that defensive line. You got rid of Ndamukong Suh, and yeah, I just don't think that this defensive front is going to be as formidable as it was last year because of Ndamukong Suh. Don't know too many other guys on their defensive front. And that's a problem. That's a problem for them because they're not going to be able to get a lot of pressure. And I think that their secondary does take a step back this year. Another point I want to make is their offensive line. So their offensive line is highlighted by Andrew Whitworth, who has a 95, 96 rating on Madden. But he's 37 years old now. He's going into his 13th, 14th, 15th season. So I think that the offensive line really takes a step back. And let me rant a little bit about Colin Cowherd. So he starts mentioning about the Saints. I jumped off the Saints bandwagon. I still think they're going to make the playoffs because their roster is just too good. But he starts saying, the Saints, they lost Melvin Ingram. And then, but wait, they got Latavius Murray back, so it's not that much of a loss. Then he starts mentioning the Rams. He all he says is 1 point. He says they realized that they were losing offensive line, so recently they've drafted offensive line. So this is one of those points where if you're watching the show, you go, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. The Rams drafted offensive line, but this is who they drafted in the 2019 NFL draft as far as offensive line. Last year, they drafted 3 people out of their 11 or so picks for their offensive line. Nate Boom, they had Allen, and I forgot one more guy, Kasky or something, Brewer. I forgot exactly who it is. And these guys, I was looking at their ratings, they're not good. They're not going to have any impact this year. Their offensive line is going to be really weak, and Jared Goff is going to have struggles. It'd be wrong to mention the Rams without mentioning Jared Goff. Now, going into the Super Bowl, everyone thought he was the next coming of Tom Brady. Jared Goff is really young, and a lot of people question why he hasn't had his contract yet. I think that's a little concerning. That means the Rams don't really trust him that much. They think he's more of a system guy. And there are a couple of question marks, especially in the playoffs. I'll pull up the stats right now. Low quarterback rating. I think he only threw 1 touchdown in those 3 games. So coming down the stretch when the defenses were good, the defenses knew what to expect. He struggled, and he was only missing Cooper Kupp. It's not like he was missing Odell Beckham Jr. He was only missing that one wide receiver, so that definitely is a concern. Going forward, I think Jared Goff is going to be a pretty decent quarterback. If I had to give a comp on him, I don't think he's going to be as good as Matt Ryan. And we're not going to look down the years and be like, oh, he had 9 straight 4,000-yard seasons and won an MVP. I think Jared Goff may win an MVP. I think he's a little bit less version of Matt Ryan. And they're both built the same. Jared Goff, just over the years, he's going to get smarter and smarter. Not really gifted that much athletically, kind of frail. And yeah, so you could say Tom Brady because of the way they're built and stuff like that. Not really that athletic, but I don't think he'll have, obviously, that many wins. And I don't think Sean McVay is the next Bill Belichick. I think Sean McVay is teaching Jared Goff little things. Jared Goff has really good accuracy. I think he's really underrated as far as accuracy goes. It's just game management. He's not good. And he had experience this year. I think the Rams take a step back this year. Okay, so they start off against the Carolina Panthers. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. Cam Newton, he's a little bit shaken up. I'm not sure if he's going to be healthy. He has a new throwing motion. I think that the Rams take that game, but I'm tempted to take Carolina because of that pass rush with you have the guy from FSU that they stole him from the Giants. I forget his name. It doesn't really matter anymore because I don't really care about him. Then you have the Saints. I think this is the loss. You play the Saints at home. I think the Saints are going to come off a loss at this point. They're not going to want to fall 0-2, so they start off their season 1-1. Then they play the Browns. I think they lose this game as well. The Browns have an amazing defensive front. I think that even though Sean McVay is a great coach, I think that the Browns have some urgency now because they are 1-1 as well. And this is earlier in the season, so the Browns are going to have this amazing offense. They're going to be clicking on all cylinders. It's going to be great. Baker Mayfield's going to be the hero of Cleveland. And I think that they start off 1-2. So going into the 4th week, they have the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers do have a strong defensive front, but I think I should be ignorant to pick the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yeah, they are at home this game, so that's why it's obvious. Then they play against the Seahawks. I think that's a loss. A primetime game, Russell Wilson at Seattle. Crowd's going to be loud. The Seattle's going to be struggling, so I think they win that. Then they lose against the 49ers as well, a 4 o'clock game. I think that the 49ers are going to be much improved this year. Then they play at the Falcons. I think that's another loss. So that means you're 2-5 going into week 8, and that's the Bengals. Initially had them losing against the Bengals, but I don't trust rookie Zach Taylor. And Sean McVay knows Zach Taylor. He was the quarterback's coach a couple years ago, so they both are really familiar with each other's schemes. Sean McVay, I think, is going to pick apart the Bengals, and I think that Zach Taylor, he did play against the Rams defense, but I think the Rams defense is just too good. I don't really trust Andy Dalton in this spot. So next we have the bye, and then they play the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Bears, and the Ravens. I think they lose 2 out of these 3 games. They lost to the Bears last year. It was pretty embarrassing. I think that, Eric Weddle and this defense, this secondary is really going to struggle against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The defensive front's going to struggle against the Bears, the Ravens, how they have such good running offenses, and I think they're just going to pound it and pound it and pound it. get pounded, and it's just that the battle in the trenches, I think, is just won by these teams because they have strong trenches. Ravens have a really underrated defensive front and offensive line. They're really underrated in the trenches, so that's why I have that. So at this point, they are 4 and 10, and then they play the Seahawks, Cowboys, 49ers, and Cardinals. You know, you're 4-8 at this point. I think they finish off the season 7-9 or 8-8. They take a step back this year, but that's no worry because they have a bright future with Jared Goff. They're going to pick in the top 10. They're going to solidify their linebacking core, and they're going to be strong going into 2020. Just as a side note, just to recap, I do like Wade Phillips. I think he's a brilliant defensive mind. I think he's a great coach. You saw what he did to Tom Brady. He only allowed them to score 13 points. As opposed to a year earlier when against the Eagles they scored 33 or 30, whatever it was, with 500 yards. Wade Phillips is a great defensive coach. I do like the Rams. I'm not hating on the Rams. I'm just trying to be realistic. This division has a high-powered offense in Arizona. I think you're going to struggle against them. I think the 49ers defensive front is going to absolutely obliterate the offensive line of the Rams. Their offensive line's a big question. I know that they have Cooper Kupp coming back. They like a couple of rookies. They think every team thinks their rookie is the next big guy. Every single team is like, oh, this guy is really impressed because your expectations were so low in the beginning, and then all of a sudden he claps. He runs a route, and it's like, oh God, I thought, what do you expect these guys to be incompetent? I know each team has their own standouts. You notice this entire video didn't mention Todd Gurley's left or right knee, whatever it is. But that's a big problem too. But they did fill in that spot with the draft. I told you, draft best player available because you never know when you're going to have to replace your guy, whether he gets injured, whether it's holdouts, whether it's whatever. You never know when you're going to have to replace a certain player in a team. Even if it's the best player, you never know when things are going to happen. So you always have to be precautious. And I do like the Rams. I just can't stress enough. They've overperformed over the past couple years. They went to the Super Bowl last year. Just think about it. In 2 years, a rookie head coach made it to the Super Bowl. I like Sean McVay's coaching style. I think it's lax. I think he's smart by, letting the players be themselves, giving the players rest that they need. The players seem to like him. But I think that they do take a step back this year, 7-9, along with the Seahawks. And I think the 49ers take this division. And a point that I want to mention, too, is turnovers. They were really good at turnovers last year. And we noticed with teams that cause a lot of turnovers, especially on defense, unless you're the Patriots, it definitely does go down. The Rams did have a high turnover rate last year. And I think that does change. But another year with Jared Goff. And, with Sean McVay, I think he gets smarter. I think he gets better. And they just work well. You're going to see the offense work well together, but they're going to lose some tight games. I mean, they did have so many tight games last year where they won by a touchdown. A ball bounces a certain way. The ball bounced the Rams' way a lot of the time last year, especially in that NFC Championship game. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a like rating. While down there, please comment, favorite, and subscribe if you haven't already. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye, guys.